Christian parenting.
I was experiencing what other parents I was communicating with were experiencing, was that we felt shame over our inability to feel the feelings we wanted to feel toward our children. We began to wonder, who am I? Am I the mother I thought I was? Did God really ask us to do this? I mean, so many things.
Yes.
And there was such deep discouragement. And back then, I didn't understand the neuroscience, but I did understand about suffering and grief and faith. And so I was leaning into that a lot in my writing.
Welcome back, Call to Love families. I am so excited to be back with you for another episode where, as you know, each week we dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical aspects of the adoption and foster care callings. Today, friends, I am thrilled to welcome back to the show Lisa C. Qualls. Lisa is a mom of 12 by birth and adoption. She also has great experience as a foster mom and a TBRI practitioner. And among her many talents, she is the co-author of many recommended resources that we use regularly in my ministry for foster and adoptive families, such as The Connected Parent, Healing for Every Heart in Adoption, which we were privileged to speak about last season, and one book in particular that has been a lifesaver for me, and that is Reclaim Compassion, The Adoptive Parent's Guide to Overcoming Blocked Care with Neuroscience and Faith. So that is what we're going to be honing in on today. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while, I did do an episode about blocked care last season, but most importantly, it was more so from my perspective and my experience while sharing some of the principles and truth that I learned through this book. So today we get to learn from the author herself. Lisa, thank you so much for being my guest today. I'm thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I have been so blessed by your resources, and getting to know you last year was such a privilege, and just hearing more of your story. So I'm excited to hear more of that today. Maybe some of our new listeners don't know you as well. So would you introduce yourself, a little bit about your family, your work, and your ministry for us?
Yes. So my husband and I together had 7 children by birth, and we got to this season in our lives. Our youngest was 3. And I remember thinking, I think the Lord has something new for me. And I actually thought it was going to be something completely different. I thought I was going to go back to grad school. And
Okay.
then the Lord just opened our hearts through a series of events. The Lord opened our hearts to the possibility of adopting some children from Ethiopia.
Okay.
And we originally started out just sponsoring a little girl while we were praying about it and thinking about it. Then we decided to adopt 2 little boys. Our youngest daughter was 3 at the time. She would be 4 when they came home. And so we decided to adopt 2 little boys younger than her. And then we learned that the orphanage where we were sponsoring this little girl had somehow thought that we were going to adopt her. And anyhow, through a whole variety of crazy things, yes, we adopted 3 unrelated children through 2 different agencies simultaneously.
Wow.
Yes, very complicated. And then we met another little girl while we were there, and we went back for her a year later and brought her home. So at the time that our children were adopted, the oldest daughter that we brought home, she was 10. Then our next daughter, and she was the one who came home last. She was the last child to join our family. And then the other 3, our daughter was 5.5, our son was 2, and our youngest son was 5 months when they
Wow.
joined our family.
That is incredible. Talk about
Yeah.
a change in dynamic in your home, right?
Oh my goodness, so much. And my oldest child at the time, I think she was 20. So we have a 20-year span from oldest to youngest. And
Wow.
for a brief time, everybody was living at home for a brief time. So we had a packed house. It was
That's
pretty
amazing.
crazy. But
I
yeah,
love
so
that. So
and
now, were you doing your work that you do now in terms of coaching and serving foster and adopted
no.
families and writing? Is that how your ministry began?
Well, it began because when we started this adoption process, I started sending out these big group emails to our family and friends. And my 12-year-old son said, Mom, you should just write a blog. And I was like, what's a blog? I mean, this is 2006, you know?
Right.
I'm like, what's a blog? So he set me up with my first blog on Blogspot, which I don't imagine even exists anymore. And I started writing this blog. And it was really just to keep everybody informed, you know, about what was going on in our lives. And what happened was at that time, we didn't have like Facebook groups or anything. There were like Yahoo Messenger type boards and groups. I don't even remember all the right words. But where we were interacting as adoptive moms was primarily through the comments and blogs. And so there was sort of a whole group of us who were adoptive moms who were blogging, and we would communicate in the comments and really got to know each other. It was so interesting.
Yeah.
And most of the blogs, I will say in the beginning, especially we're talking Christian adoption blogs,
Yeah.
were very encouraging, which was good,
Right.
positive, which was good. But I think none of us were getting very honest
Mm.
because after we brought our kids home, because we
Yep.
didn't want to discourage anybody when it was
Right.
really hard. And also, there wasn't all the great information we have now. So when it was really hard, we didn't really know what to say, or was it us? Were we, you know? So there's so much history there. But what happened is in 2007, Dr. Karen Purvis and Dr. David Cross published their book, The Connected Child. And it was
Yes.
actually one of my blog readers who said, Lisa, you should read this book. So I started reading it, and I started interacting, like literally on my blog. I was writing about things in the connected parent.
Okay.
And through a series of events, I ended up meeting Dr. Purvis. And at that time, Michael and Amy Monroe, they were doing Empowered to Connect together.
Yep.
I met them. Turned out they'd been reading my blog. We got to know each other. I started speaking and writing for Connected, or for Empowered to Connect. Through that, I ended up writing The Connected Parent with Dr. Purvis. It's like the Lord just sort of one step at a time. I just did the
Yeah.
next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I don't know, the Lord's really done an amazing thing to give me the ministry I have. I mean, I published my first book. People get discouraged. They think, oh, I'll never write a book. Well, I published it when I was 56.
I love that.
So it took us from 2012 until 2020 to actually publish the book. And Dr. Purvis had passed away before it actually came out in
Right.
publication.
Oh
But
my
what a
goodness.
gift it was to get to write that book with her. And from there, it just opened many, many doors, as you can imagine, more
Yes.
speaking. I ended up partnering with forming Adoption Wise and having a podcast there, which we've now closed down. But I do all of my work supporting adoptive, foster, and kinship parents myself through coaching, writing, communities I lead, the Hope Circle for Moms, Wholehearted Compassion for adoptive, uh, foster, and kinship parents, both moms and dads. So lots of stuff that's happened since then. And my youngest son is graduating from high school in June.
Oh my goodness.
We can't even believe it. When he graduates and leaves for college, which he's going to go to college here in town, but he's going to move on, we will have been parenting children in our home for 38 years
That's
straight.
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. And doing
Yeah.
all the things you just listed, that's just incredible to me. And I love hearing you share all of that. And it's such an encouragement because I'm remembering our journey. We were just a few years behind you in terms of starting our adoption journey and
Mhm.
how information was just nowhere to be found. And
True.
you felt like you were just navigating completely in the dark. You
Yeah.
were feeling all of these really hard things, thinking and experiencing all of these really hard things with the realities that come with adoption and foster care, and there were no resources to be found. And so I
No.
remember myself as a mom, and I've shared this with our listeners, thinking people would come up and go, "Oh, isn't this the most incredible, beautiful miracle that you've ever experienced?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, I got to the point where I would say, "Which answer would you like to hear?"
That's good. That's at least
Right?
honest, you
Yeah.
know?
Do you wanna hear the real answer of the fact that I'm drowning and I feel like a
Right.
horrible human because of what I'm
Right.
experiencing, or do you want the rosy Hallmark version?
Yeah.
So that is why when I discovered Reclaim Compassion, I was like, "Where was this book so many years ago
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
was drowning?" And it's such an incredible resource, so that's why I was so thrilled when you were generous enough to say, "Hey, I'll come back on and let's talk about blocked care." So I'm like, "Yes, please, let's
Yes.
dive into this," because I think understanding the reality of what it is, having words for it, is a
Yes.
game changer for parents. So can we dive into that and just have you share? I know you had shared with me there's a little bit of a revised definition, which I'm super excited to
Well,
hear, of
it's
blocked care.
just a teeny bit of a change. Well, let me back up
Yes.
just for one second. You're talking about how, we did not know. None of us knew what was going on with us. We
Yeah.
just knew that what we were experiencing did not feel the way we thought it would feel to be an
Yes.
adoptive parent, foster parent.
Yes.
And back then, I used to teach these breakout sessions at big conferences, and I just called them When Your Heart Feels Trampled, because
Mm,
I didn't have words yet. All I
yes.
knew was that what I was experiencing, what other parents I was communicating with were experiencing, was that we felt shame
Yes.
over our inability to feel the feelings we wanted to feel toward our children. We began to wonder, who am I? Am I the
Yes.
mother I thought I was? Did God really ask us to do this? I mean, so many things. And
Yes.
there was such deep discouragement. And back then, I didn't understand the neuroscience, but I did understand about suffering and grief and faith. And so I was leaning into that a lot in my writing. And then I read Brain Based Parenting
Okay.
by doctors John Balin and Dan Hughes. And in brain based parenting, they define something called blocked care. And when I heard that it had a name, that what I was feeling had a name, I cried. I was like, oh my goodness, it is not just me. I am
Yes.
not a terrible person. There
Right.
is something going on in my nervous system.
Yeah.
So, since that first reading, I've studied a lot about blocked care, the neuroscience. I worked with my co author, Melissa Corkum. We had the privilege of meeting with Dr. John Balin, discussing it further with him. I mean, what a gift I
Right.
mean, he's amazing. And we
Yeah.
have a podcast episode about that actually, where we interviewed him. But this is the definition that that Melissa and I really have landed on together. And I'm going to share it with you, and then we can kind of break it down what it means.
Let's do it.
So, blocked care is a self protective mechanism in a parent's nervous system activated by excessive stress. This suppresses the higher brain functions needed for caregiving and the accompanying loving and empathetic feelings. As a result, the parent's nervous system develops a defensive stance toward their child. So the parent is still providing good care to their child, but the heart seems to have left the relationship. That
Mm,
resonates strongly with me.
yeah.
So, when I formed my support online support group for blocked care, I named it Wholehearted Compassion, because when we're in blocked care, to me, it really did feel like, okay, I'm cranking out the work. I'm feeding my kids. I'm
Right.
giving them, they have clean clothes. I'm taking to them to the millions of appointments they had,
Right.
but my heart wasn't in it.
Yes.
In fact, there were times I just felt like I could hardly stand to be around one of my children in particular. Like, I
Yes.
would hear her coming down the stairs in the morning and I would feel sick.
Yeah.
And I'd have to sort of gird myself like, Lord, help me, help me, help me do better today with this child,
Yes.
because I didn't know yet that this was rooted in my nervous system. And there were answers for what we could do to overcome it.
Yes, that is amazing. I love that. And let's talk about that too, because we don't pair the two with the neuroscience
Hmm.
and what our bodies are physiologically experiencing as a result of the stress of high need caregiving and
Hmm.
high need attachment and all of the things that go with. We don't That's not what we signed up for. We were like, "Oh, this is
Right.
amazing. Adoption. It's beautiful. It's pretty. Christians should do it." Okay. And then we're smacked with the realities of this. And so lean into that for us a little bit more, Lisa, and just explaining physiologically what that stress is doing to our bodies.
Yes. So, when we bring our kids home, many, many of our children have experienced trauma. I mean,
Right.
I'm not saying, well, actually, every child in adopted and foster care has experienced some trauma, because simply we know that being separated from your first parent, your
Right.
primary first caregiver, even if it's at birth, is traumatic for a child.
Right.
That child in utero knows their mother, knows her voice, knows her movements. And We also know that children experience trauma in utero from exposure to substances, from the extreme stress and trauma that mom might be in.
Right.
So we know that every child who comes to us through adoption, foster care, kinship care has experienced extreme loss, and something has gone wrong for them to need to be cared for in a new family.
Right.
And so our kids often exhibit what we would call, what Dan Hughes and John Balin defined as block trust,
Mm.
that they, because of what they've experienced deep within their nervous system, they are wired in a self-protective way to not trust, because
Right.
on a fundamental level, they don't believe that their needs are going to be met,
Mm.
that somehow they have to meet their needs themselves, and they cannot trust for their needs to be met for them.
Right.
Because we know that the thing about attachment is the child expresses a need, and whatever it is, hunger, thinking of an infant, hunger, cold, fear, whatever it is, they express the need. The loving, stable adult meets that need. The child is soothed and calmed.
Right.
And, I think it's this statement is so beautiful. Dr. Kirk Thompson says, um, everyone is born looking for someone who's looking for them.
Mm.
Whew, right? Like,
Wow.
like we are wired to be looking for this caregiver who is going to, gosh, that chokes me up. Just that,
Yes.
who is looking for us and wants to meet our needs. That's how we are designed. But
Right.
when that is broken, then that child is very often in a self-protective state that we call blocked trust.
Yeah.
So we go into adoption or fostering and we're ready. Like, we want to love these kids. We want
Right.
to bring them into our family. And, certainly I knew that my children had experienced trauma. I knew they did. I knew it was not going to be easy. I was not naive, but
Right.
I definitely did not know how hard it was going to be on me, on them, on my other children, or
Mm.
how long it was going to last. Like, in
Yeah.
my mind, I thought, yeah, the first year is going to be tough, you know? And
Yeah.
here we are 18 years later. And let me tell
Right.
you, I don't want to discourage anybody, but there are still challenges.
Right.
We're much better equipped for them now, and we
Yes.
understand so much more.
Yes.
So we bring this beautiful child into our family or children, and we are wired to connect with them. And as we begin to do the things that come naturally to us, give eye contact, gentle touch, all the things that we do,
Yeah.
often we're met with a response that our brain and our nervous system is not expecting.
Right.
Either we get an indifferent response, kind of a flatness, we might get an aggressive response, we might get a negative response. And over time, our nervous system, which is wired to protect us, will
Yeah.
begin to say, something's not right here. This is not what I am expecting. Like, literally, our brain is expecting something different. And as over and over, the response that we're wired to expect, as we don't receive that, our nervous system begins to tell us, this is not safe for you.
Yeah.
And it begins to protect us.
Mm.
So we begin to have this sense of, I don't think I want to get very close to this child, and this is not cognitive. This is deeply
Right.
subconscious,
Right.
or our nervous system says, be careful, be careful. Don't offer that. Don't do this. Our nervous system is trying to keep us safe. And that's
Yeah.
what it's supposed to do. God
Right.
made our nervous system to do that for us.
Yeah.
But in this case, it it impacts our ability to connect with that child that we so badly do want to connect with.
Right.
Although eventually we may not even want that anymore. We may, parents get to the point where they say, I just want this kid to turn 18 and move out of my house.
Right.
Or in foster care, like, I really thought I wanted this child to stay, and I do not. I
Yes.
cannot.
Right.
So, okay,
Yes.
that was a lot.
I love it. So,
Okay.
so helpful. Yes. Thank you for unpacking that for us. And I think the next logical question would lead because, for some of our listeners today, this is the first that they're hearing of this and they're going, I feel so seen right now.
Okay.
But, and that was definitely me. When I was
Mhm.
introduced to this concept, I felt so seen and understood and less horrible,
Yes,
in
yes.
thinking because it really when you understand the dynamic of the self-protective versus the self-protective, I mean, there's work that has to be put into that to overcome it.
Absolutely.
But I think acknowledging it is probably a great place to start and the importance of acknowledging it. Maybe you can give us just some indicators for our listeners today, Lisa, who maybe just need okay, this is going on with me. This is going on with me. Like this is a check. I'm experiencing blocked care. Oh, this is
Mm.
another check. I'm experiencing blocked care. Can you give us a few examples of those?
Yeah, do you want me to read through the 10 signs?
Sure. Let's do
It'll
that.
take a minute, but I will let me do that quickly so that as you're listening, dear parent who's listening, I'm going to just read through the 10 signs of blocked care and just kind of make note. Am I experiencing this? Is there one that like jumps out at me? So I'll try to read somewhat quickly so we don't take too much time here.
Sure.
Okay, number one, you're too caught up in coping with your child's behavior to be curious about the meaning behind it.
Mm,
Two, you feel defensive and guard yourself from rejection. Three, you feel burned out, chronically overwhelmed, and fatigued. Four, you feel resentment toward one or more of your children or your situation as a whole. For foster and adoptive and kinship parents, you may even regret opening your heart and your home. Five, you feel irritable with other family and friends. Six, you isolate yourself. Seven, you become cynical about helpful ideas. Eight, you feel you've lost compassion, which leads to shame. Nine, you experience a crisis of faith or a challenge of a personal belief system. And 10, you don't feel real pleasure in parenting.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think many of us would say, yes. I mean, when I asked parents how many of these signs you're experiencing, many of them will say
Right.
all of them,
Yes.
and some of them we experience maybe more strongly than others.
Right.
But yeah, I will say it feels deeply disheartening when we feel this way.
It is.
And it's hard to go on. It's hard to keep getting out of bed every morning and
Right.
taking care of our kids. And it
Yes.
takes a toll on the body,
Yeah.
on our souls, our bodies, our minds. It takes such a toll on the
Yep.
parent to be in blocked care.
It does. I can relate to you talking about hearing your child coming. I would hear phantom cries even when she wasn't crying and screaming from her trauma
Oh,
experience. Our
yeah.
daughter came to us as a newborn, and so she screamed intensely for extended periods of time. We're talking years.
Yeah.
And so even when she wasn't screaming, I heard screaming because my body had become so conditioned to it. The stress of it, like my eyelashes fell out
My
because of the
hair fell out.
stress.
My hair
Yes.
fell out.
Yes.
Yes.
So things like that, gut issues, because of the
Yes.
chronic stress, the tension in our body, headaches,
Hmm.
body pain. I mean, these are all things where I don't know if any of y'all are having an aha moment right now, but I'm hoping between just some shared experiences that Lisa and I are talking about right now, this will help you to kind of have that aha moment to say,
Right.
okay, this is where I am. So then the next question we have to pose is, where do we begin? To right
Yes.
the ship, right? To get
Yes.
back into a healthy space to because every single one of our listeners, and you and I included, Lisa, we went into this out of obedience to the Lord with the purest of intentions, a right heart to the best of our understanding, not knowing what we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And then we've experienced this on the other side of it. And it is just a jumbling of confusion and emotions and the physiological, experiences that we're having. And so, what's the first step? Where would you encourage us with the first step?
Well, I think many parents, when they even hear and learn about blocked care, some of that shame begins to lift. And that helps
Yes,
a lot.
it
You
does.
know, understanding what blocked care is helpful. But we can't stop there because to sort of recover the balance and the health of our nervous system, we have to take steps. It's not enough just to understand it in our minds because this is subconscious. So we
Right,
need to begin caring for the nervous system in a whole variety of ways. And without getting super complicated, the nervous system is constantly scanning our environment,
right,
constantly scanning inside us, outside us, and trying to assess, am I safe? Am I not? And so there are through which the nervous system takes in information. One is what we tend to refer to them in the book as buckets. So the first is our internal world, which is our mind and our bodies. So we're taking in information with our minds and our bodies. Secondly is the external bucket, the external world, which is literally our environment around us, and what information our nervous system is taking in from there. And then third is our relational world. Nervous systems communicate with nervous systems subconsciously, very, very
Yeah.
quickly. Like even this way, virtually, I can see you, you can see me. Our nervous systems are communicating. We're nodding at each other. You know, we're feeling safe together as we're
Yes.
talking.
Yeah.
So what we did in Reclaim Compassion and what I do in my work, in my coaching group, Wholehearted Compassion, and with coaching, is we look at these pathways and we begin to say, okay, how can I give what we call cues of safety through my internal world, which is my mind and my body?
Okay.
So how do I fill that bucket of, well, let's start with the body. With the body, we know, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about this, Summer, I tell you, but
Absolutely.
we know there are things we can do for our bodies that will tell our nervous system, I'm safe, I'm okay. Simple things like movement, walking. Walking is so regulating for the nervous system.
Yes.
We do not have to start training for marathons.
Right.
But we can walk. Walking is okay. I'm going to drop another little thing. Bruce Perry says activities that are rhythmic, repetitive, and relational are regulating. Regulation is what we want in our nervous system. It's that
Yes.
balance. So any activity that's rhythmic and repetitive, walking. And when you walk your dog, it's also relational. If you're
Yeah.
walking with a friend, it's relational. So
Yeah.
walking, rocking in a rocking chair, hydration, sleep. Okay, sleep is huge for parents in
Yes.
blocked care. We are so stressed we can't sleep. And
Right.
there's a lot, I mean, there's so much research out there about sleep, and we don't have time to dig into it, but sleep has to be a priority. Our bodies, this takes a huge toll on our bodies. I
It
mentioned
does.
my hair falling out. Many of us gain weight because of the cortisol that's flooding our systems. Some people lose weight because they simply feel nauseated and can't eat. I mean, this
Yep.
is significant stress.
Yes.
If you've ever had an autoimmune disorder, it may very likely flare
Right.
because of of how taxing this is on you. Okay, so body, mind. I think the mind is probably one of the most important things. We get trapped in this negativity bias where
Yes.
everything about our child feels negative.
That's
Everything.
right.
You know, somebody breaks something and immediately our mind says it was that kid.
Right.
We lose sight of joy. We can't see beauty. So there are many, many things we do to work on giving those cues of safety to our minds. External world, that one's kind of more easy and fun. But one of the things I tell parents is, like, if the clutter in your house is adding stress, choose
Mhm.
just one little space that you're going to clear that space. If you're wearing if you've gained weight in all of this and your jeans are too darn tight, get new pants, because
Yeah.
your body is constantly telling you this isn't good, I don't feel good, um, whatever it is, for your external world
Yeah.
to bring in beauty. And I mentioned Dr. Kurt Thompson before. He says, put yourself in the way of oncoming beauty. Like, nature is
Mhm.
very healing.
Yes.
Lighting a candle that just gives a little beauty and warmth on your desk. I mean, there are so many things.
Yeah.
Okay, relational world. When your relationship with your child is tricky, when it's just hard and your brain is so tired of thinking, you need life-giving people to pour
Yes.
into you. And I think when you're in blocked care, it's really easy sometimes to gravitate toward other parents who are in blocked care, who are gathering because they're so burned out on their kids. And we
Yeah.
see this in online groups that basically do they kind of come together in their suffering, and they want to stay there because it's all about the
Right.
kid. And I
Yeah.
I don't fault them. I get it. This is so darn hard.
Yeah.
Um, But what we want to do is surround ourselves with life-giving people who are going to speak truth to us, who are going to have empathy for us. And maybe you have those people physically around you. Maybe you have, I mean, my best friend is someone I met through all of this. And what we did for each other was speak truth, and we loved each other's kids. And so
Yeah.
when one of our kids, we were just at our very, very end, we could remind the other, like, okay, remember where this behavior is coming from.
Right.
This is rooted in her trauma,
Yeah.
and she's a child of God, and she is precious, and so are you, like speaking truth to
So
each other.
good.
So
Yeah.
life-giving relationships, and of course our most life-giving relationship is with our Lord and our Savior, who
Yeah.
is our secure base, our safe haven. I mean,
Right.
our relationship with the Lord is the most important relationship to carry us through this, because we're
Right.
suffering and we're scared and we need him. We need to press into the Lord.
Yes.
So overcoming black hair involves all of those things. So there's not just one simple thing, but there are simple places to start. You
Yeah.
know, the last thing we want to do in helping a parent overcome block care is burden them. You're already completely overwhelmed. So
Absolutely.
we start very, very small, tiny steps toward
That's so good.
overcoming block care.
Love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain all of that. That is so, so helpful. And we can take pieces of that and what you've just shared and apply that based on where each of us are. And I
Yeah.
think something that you and I kind of touched on before we hit record today that I really think is important is I'm a one and done type of girl. I'm like, let's check
Yeah.
that box and move on.
Yeah. Me
Right.
too.
And
Me too.
so I love checking boxes. It's my type A
Yeah.
personality.
Yeah.
But for this experience, and you talked about this, it's been an 18-year process. And it's
Yes.
not like you're like, yep, I've overcome this, check that box, I've moved on, I'm the expert, buy my book. That's
Mhm.
not the experience. We have to realize that blocked care can flow in and out of our
Yes.
seasons of life and
Yes.
relationship with our kids. So let's talk about that for a moment. And I hinted to you, for me, the summertime, coming out of the summertime, I mean, I'm withered like my plants look outside when it's
Yeah.
105, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's just kind of how I feel. It's the best way I can describe it and give an image to that. And so I'll find myself tensing and dreading before the summer even begins. And man, summertime is supposed to be your favorite season and all the
I
fun things that you get
know.
to do. And so there's been that kind of negative bias spin, as you were talking about,
Mhm.
on, oh, the summertime's coming and I'm just going to have to grin and bear it. And then when school starts back, I'll be able to, and
Yeah.
so let's lean into that a little bit, or maybe you can speak into that based on your experience of the recurrence of blocked care and how we can even prepare ourselves before we step back into it.
Mm. That's a great question. Yeah, I think blocked care, in my experience, it it seems like, well, for one thing, I will say it's not only us as adoptive parents. This can happen with all kinds of parents because other
Yeah,
parents are under excessive stress for other reasons.
it's a great
It
point.
could be a medical crisis, it could be a divorce,
Yeah.
it could be you have a child with neurodivergence and it's really, really hard, you know?
Yes.
So all of us, I think, can easily sort of move into this sort of continuum of blocked care. And we may be way at the far end where we're so done that we need extreme help.
Right.
Or we may be just like, at the earlier, it's not as severe, but like you're saying, like, "Oh, no, summer's coming." For me, it was every weekend. It just felt like a nightmare
Yeah.
because I couldn't it was so difficult to keep my daughter regulated. I just felt like I was always ready for the next crisis, you
I
know?
understand that.
Yeah, and so I think once we understand it and we know what this nervous system dysregulation feels like for us in our bodies, in our minds, we can catch it earlier and we can begin to do the things that we know help us stay in a state of regulation, in a state of balance in our nervous system.
That's good.
Um, and so maybe, like, okay, some of the things that are absolutely most helpful for me, walking, which I already mentioned,
Yeah.
um, prayer, absolutely prayer. And there are so many different ways to pray. One of the ways that has helped me the most is to simply use simple breath prayer. Have you talked
Mm.
about that on your podcast, breath prayer?
No, but I have a friend who that's one of her platforms, and I think it's fascinating. So,
It
yeah,
is
lean into that.
so good. Okay,
Mhm.
well, this is one of the things I always teach my people is that the beauty of breath prayer is that our breath regulates our nervous system and our prayer presses us into relationship with the Lord. So like it's
Yeah.
this beautiful combination. And so a breath prayer is very simply choosing a very short scripture, a very a few words of truth, and you pray part of it as you breathe in and the
Yeah.
other as you breathe out. So for me, when I'm really struggling with regulation, I will picture Jesus in that boat with the storm raging around him, and I'll
Yeah.
breathe in peace and I'll breathe out, be still, because
Mm.
that's what he spoke.
Yeah.
Those are his words. I'll breathe in
It's
peace,
great.
be still. Um, it might be something like, breathe in, the Lord is my shepherd. Breathe out, I have everything I need.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking of one I'm preparing to teach on this at a retreat. And I was thinking about when anxiety was great within me, your consolation gave me joy. What is it? Now I'm going to forget the exact verse. I know it.
Yeah.
Anyhow, like there are really simple prayers that we can take straight from scripture.
I
We don't
love
have
that.
to memorize a bunch of words. We're talking a few words. And
Yeah.
then when we feel, well, first of all, we can be doing this all the time, but when
Yes.
we feel that dysregulation coming, we stop. And I
Mm.
literally will stop and breathe in peace, be still over and over. And I'm not
Yeah.
emptying my mind. This is not mysticism. This is anchoring
Yes.
myself
Yeah.
in the word and
Yes.
using the word and my breath together to calm my nervous
Love that.
system. So
Oh,
very powerful practice. There's a
yeah.
great book called Breath as Prayer, which I had on my desk just moments ago. And so she explains this really beautifully. And then she gives a whole bunch of examples of different breath prayers, which is really
Mm.
lovely. But
Yeah.
I think many of us may have a favorite verse that we lean into anyhow. When I am afraid, I will trust in you. I mean, simple. We don't need oh, you know what is hilarious? Here's the book. My microphone's sitting on top of it.
I love
Breath
it.
Breath as
Oh,
Prayer
that's
by
beautiful.
Jennifer Tucker. It's a beautiful book.
It
I
is.
recommend it. But you don't need to read a whole book. You can take simple things that you already
Yeah.
know and just use such a simple thing. When things were so difficult, I would go in my laundry room, shut the door, and get on my knees and
Yeah.
just pray the simplest things.
Yeah.
Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me,
Mm.
or Lord, have mercy. I could go
Yes.
on and on. You can tell I'm excited about breath
Absolutely.
prayer.
No, I love it so much. And, Lisa, you really brought us to a place where that is my heart for this podcast is that we bring it back to that the practical is helpful, the clinical is helpful, but anchoring ourselves in the
Yes.
biblical, in the word, like that is where I want to camp out. And in every
Yeah.
conversation that we have on the show, I want it to be brought back to that. And so it's just the Lord is so good just to bring us to this place in the conversation. And I was even thinking because I love the idea of breath prayer and
Hmm.
I geek out on this, as well. And I was watching a video recently and they were talking about just the simple act of physically inhaling the sounds that we make utter the name Yahweh. When
Yes.
you say, have you heard that?
I
It's
have.
incredible. So you breathe in Yahweh,
Yeah.
and it's just like, so
Yeah.
the very act of breathing that the genius of God
Yeah.
in being his perfect creation, that he made
Yeah.
and it's just amazing to me, but and then scripture backing it up with when we can't utter a word. He
Yes.
is interceding for us, but we are still
Hmm.
uttering his name as we breathe.
That's so
So,
beautiful.
sorry, I had to deep dive for a second there, y'all, but as
No.
you were talking about that,
Yeah.
I think that is so important for us to remember, and you've done such a phenomenal job today in this conversation, Lisa, bring us back to the simple, because you're
Hmm.
right, we're already so depleted.
We are.
We don't always have the margin to sit down and read a book because we are just
I
crisis
couldn't.
managers,
I
right? I
couldn't
couldn't
read. I
either.
lost my
No,
ability to read books, I
same.
swear. Yeah.
Yes, I lost the
Mhm.
joy of that,
Mhm.
and I love books, and so,
Yep.
yeah, you find yourself in that space, so just start with the simple, like you're talking
Yes.
about,
Very
finding
simple.
that moment to utter his name, to utter those breath prayers,
Yeah.
to sit your Bible open on the counter and you go back
Yeah.
to the same scripture over and over again as you're walking
Yes.
past it throughout the day. You're
Yes.
lighting those candles. There's certain music
Yep.
that is healing frequency,
Yeah.
actually, and that's been scientifically proven. So I have certain stations that I will play in my car, in my kitchen. I have it on vast majority of the day, and it just keeps my central nervous
Yeah.
system more regulated.
Yeah.
And so things that we discover about ourselves and how the Lord designed our bodies to
Mhm.
function well so that we can return to this place of compassionate outpouring for the
Yes.
children that he's placed in our care, right? I think
Right.
that's so important for us to lean heavily into. So I'm so grateful for everything you've shared. I would like to ask you to close out our conversation today by speaking to that listener
Mm.
who just feels so trapped in blocked
Yeah.
care. They want to get out. They recognize it. They're hearing everything we've talked about, and they're like, I check all those 10 boxes plus 20 more.
Mhm.
You know, what word of encouragement do you have for that listener who just feels so discouraged and without hope?
Mm. That's so good. I think one of the things we often experience is we attribute this to our own failure, that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah,
And, I always think about the Apostle Paul and all the things he suffered. And just because it's hard and maybe you're suffering, that doesn't mean that you have done anything wrong or that you're not in God's will. I mean, the
so good.
Apostle Paul was shipwrecked more than once. And
Right.
I think, you know, it may be really, really hard, but you aren't alone. The Lord is with you.
Yeah.
Lean into him. And if you feel like you can't find him, it's okay. He understands. You can even pray, Lord, I don't feel like you're even here, but I need help.
Yeah.
Like help my unbelief, help me. And the Lord will meet you. I know he will. I believe he will. He says it in his word. And there is so much hope. You can overcome blocked care just one tiny step at a time. I wish we had a lot more time to go through all of that, but you can find that information. We'll talk about that. But um, breathe,
Mm.
breathe, step outside, look for beauty. Is there one thing outside your window when all is chaos around you? Is there one thing that is beautiful? I'm looking out my window right now and there are these beautiful puffy clouds. One thing.
Yeah.
Begin to look for beauty. Begin to, press into the Lord and
Yeah.
and don't give up. Don't just hold on to your kids are 18. It can be better. Parenting can be better than this. And you're
Yeah.
not alone.
So good, Lisa. Thank you so much. And that does give hope because we pour so much out trying to help our children rewire their own brains to
Hmm.
trust and to connect. But we have to remember that we have that same need.
We do.
And those two things can work together as we
Hmm.
pursue that, especially under the loving care of our Father
Yeah.
in the Lord. So good. Lisa, you're just a treasure, and I'm so
Thank
grateful
you.
for you. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. I want to make sure you've mentioned coaching a couple of times. Of
Yeah.
course, your amazing resources. I only named a handful of them. There are many more that you can look into. Share with our listeners how they can learn more about you and connect with you.
Okay. Well, my website, lisacqualls.com. I have information on there about the retreats I offer for women, for moms, which we're getting ready for one, and it's the best. It's so exciting. So I have retreats. I do private coaching. I have two online communities. One is just for moms. It's very deeply faith-based. And the other is, and we call that the Hope Circle. The other is called Wholehearted Compassion. It's specifically for moms and dads working to overcome block care. Single parents, it doesn't, married, it doesn't matter. We love everybody to be part of it. And my books, of course. So I would just love for any of your readers, take a look at my website. We're in the process of updating it. It's quite outdated. And eventually there will be a blocked care assessment you can do. So it may not be there right now, but it will be coming. And, Reclaim Compassion it is a really helpful book. I'm
It is.
thankful I got to write it. I really am.
Absolutely. It is a valued resource now. And I'm thankful that we have it now. No, I wish I had it much sooner,
Me
but the
too.
Lord is sovereign in that timing. So I'm just so grateful for your time today and everything that you've shared with us. It's such a pleasure having you on. I hope you'll come back another time.
Anytime.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.